Welcome to the new series of Speak Up, the television and social media platform for Freemasonry in New Zealand. I am Barry Rushton, your host, and thank you for joining us this evening. My first guest this evening is another BJ, just like me, a Barry John. It's BJ Clark from Christchurch. He is a man who wears many hats. He's the National President of the Returned Servicemen's Association, a National Manager for CCS Disability Action, Master of his Lodge twice. It's great to have him here. Second up tonight, joining us from a marathon I'm picking, is Andro Besich, who runs marathons not necessarily of the normal kind, but in strange places, harsh conditions, always just to test himself. Closing out the program is our own Graham Houston, who talks tonight about the formation of a new lodge called Lodge Matariki. It is a great story. My first guest this evening is all the way from Christchurch. It is great to have him here. Hello, BJ. Another BJ Clark.
Good to see you.
BJ Rushton. Welcome, my good friend. Tell us, Christchurch, are you a bit sick and tired of just how long it's taking to get things back to normal? I'll say normal in that sense. Or do you think, well, they've got so much to do?
Well, you're right, Barry. There is a heck of a lot to do from the earthquakes. And I think people underestimated the actual damage that was done at the substructure. And that's something they've had to get right before they can start work above. But if you look at Christchurch now, there's a lot of vibrancy coming back into the city. And there's still a wee way to go. But we will get there because we're from Canterbury and we're strong.
I hate to admit this, but last time I was in Christchurch was before the first earthquake. And that's a long time. In 2011, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And to a certain degree, I don't mind that in a sense because my memory of Christchurch still is still the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the city itself, there are aspects about the city that will never change. The river, the parks, etc. But you will see new buildings. You'll see new areas where people are moving to slightly within the city. But it really is. It's looking good. There's some great stuff there. Especially the bars and the shops, the quarters that are coming back where people can visit.
Become quite vibrant.
Yeah, and people are moving into the city too. A lot of apartments, Central City, are living, and that's going to be great.
Great. Well, I must get down. Before we tell our viewers where your career's gone now, tell us a little bit about the early days. Right? You joined when you were about 15 and a half. You joined the cadets.
Yes, well, I went into assembly at Nelson College one day, and there was this chappie talking about this cadet system, and before I knew it, I'd been recruited, and at the dizzy age of 15 and a half years, I was going into a very cold Wairuru in some January in 1970. And so the cadets were designed as a way of getting young people identified as future leaders in the army, and it was a great experience.
You know, in my early days, my brother, he wasn't with the Army Cadet, but he was with the Air Force, and I can always remember him with the peaked blue cap, you know, and I was so envious because it just looked so fantastic.
Well, you did feel pretty special, I suppose, when you're in your uniforms, and exactly. One hoped that you were sort of perhaps attractive to some of the young lassies around. But
I think it was the sailors, wasn't it?
Yeah, the sailors always did it the best. So yeah, I had 2 years as a cadet in Wairau, and so that was a transition from the cadet, and then at 17 and a half, you joined the regular force.
Great. So you're still in the Army, I'll say the Army, right, in 1979, right?
Yes.
And that was sort of at the end of the Cold War era, right? And I believe that you were posted, now I didn't know any of this, you were at the New Zealand Army went to Moscow. You were actually in Moscow for a period of time. Yeah,
so my background was as a builder, as a carpenter and joiner, and so the New Zealand Embassy required quite a considerable amount of refurbishment. It was a 3-storey and an attic building with a basement. And so over a period of 3 teams, went over some 18, 20 months, we went up there and we refurbished the embassy from top to bottom.
I believe it's in quite a good spot, right? What was at that stage? It was on the edge of the river, the Moscow River?
Yeah, it was close to the river, and it was right inside the ring road. It was close to all the attractions in Moscow. And for a young person of some 25, it was an education. For example, the first night we were offered tickets to go to the Bolshoi Theatre. That wasn't a place where a young man, you didn't go to the opera or the ballet. But when people came back and explained what it was all about, and I got the opportunity to go to the Bolshoi, it was just amazing.
Fantastic.
Stunning. But it was an amazing city, a beautiful city, so much art, just incredible.
But you were down in Antarctic too. You went down as part of the countries that try and protect the ecosystem and things down there?
Yeah, so I didn't get enough of the cold in Moscow, and so decided to pop down to Antarctica in 1986 for the summer season there. And so the role of the Army down there was we were rebuilding Scott Base, providing insulated buildings. So my role down there was my team built a very large building capable. It was going to be the mechanical workshop. It was capable of taking a D8 bulldozer. We also built an incinerator building, given that the protection of the ecosystem down there meant burning rubbish rather than leaving it lying around.
I believe also too, amongst many other things that you're doing, that you're actually heavily involved still with the RSA, correct? I believe that you are the top.
I'm the national president for the RSA.
National president.
And again, it's one of those things that I got involved almost accidentally, to be honest, and I had no intention ever to progress further than I was on the executive of the Papanui RSA in Christchurch. But things I didn't learn when I was in the Army not to put my hand up and volunteer. And so I found myself as the national president of an organisation that I really am very passionate about, to ensure that our veterans, those that are served, those that are still serving, receive the support that they so richly deserve.
Well, it's become quite obvious, hasn't it, over the last few years, that even though the number of the veterans may be dwindling, the actual increase of the younger dependents, or even of those, or even young folk in themselves, are actually taking an interest in RSAs again, right? And the actual whole respect for the effort in the war times.
Yes, while our Second World War and Malaya, Vietnam veterans are, of course, in Korea passing on, unfortunately, we're still generating veterans faster today than we ever have before, with our young people serving overseas in places like Afghanistan, Timor, etc. So there are a group there that will still require the support of the RSA, and a number of the issues may not manifest themselves now, but they certainly may in the future, and that's why the RSA needs to be there, ready to support those young people in their time of need.
Before we have a little chat about your life in Freemasonry, I know that you have a great, and excuse me for reading this because I have to, it says that you're now the National Manager for Access and Infrastructure for CCS Disability Action. It's a big title. Break it down for us. What does all that mean? Okay,
so what that means is I have a role of looking after our buildings. CCS has offices from Whangarei all the way down to Invercargill, and my role with those buildings is to inspect them, identify maintenance issues, and then pass them on to the managers for them to be able to plan the maintenance. On the access side of it, I manage the mobility parking scheme. So for those who have impairments, etc., the elderly, the mobility parking permits enable them to park close to buildings, etc. And I also am an access advisor. I audit buildings for accessibility. So there is CCS Disability Action, whilst we support in our support role, supporting those with impairments, we also actively promote the need for an accessible environment so that everyone has the opportunity to access the community. CCS was formed in 1935 from the polio epidemic, and it was then called Crippled Children's Society because it was the young children that were affected by polio. But now, because we support people right from cradle to the grave, hence we have taken on the name CCS Disability Action, so that we are reflecting all that we support.
Now, with regards to your Freemasonry involvement, tell us a little bit about how your good friend, worshipful brother John Masters, I think it was, he got you interested in Freemasonry. What did he say? What did he do? What triggered you?
Well, John Masters was a mentor of mine through the RSA work, etc. He was an active man in supporting veterans as well. And he always used to, every now and again, say, BJ, you're the sort of person that we would like to join Freemasonry. I was very busy then with my RSA work, my ordinary work, etc. And whenever I take something on, I like to take it on 100%. So I kept putting it off and saying, well, when I'm not quite so busy, John. Then unfortunately, John's health deteriorated quite seriously. And so as he wanted to be the one that sponsored me, I said, John, now's the time. And I was very privileged that I had most worshipful brother Ray Duncan and John Masters were my sponsors into joining Masonry. Fantastic. And I've never regretted it.
Do you think that your sort of military background, you know, the discipline that you had, you think that flows through a little bit in the way that you approach Freemasonry, either in your own lodge and personally?
most definitely. You can never take the military out of the man, and that's a negative and a positive. So yes, within my Freemasonry, I've got no doubt that my military training does or is influenced into the lodge.
Yeah. You see, sometimes you see it in lodges. There's a push for things to be a bit more relaxed. People to read ritual instead of learn it, and not so much more casual than it used to be. I'm sure that does irk you a little. It irks me a bit, but does it irk you a tad?
I would have to be honest and say yes, it does. But then it's not for me to decide the where Freemasonry goes in the future. But I think from the United Forces Lodge, we still have a very clear requirement that we learn our ritual. And for an example, in the modern technology today, I have been to a lodge where the inner guard was reading his charge from a tablet. Now, my preceptor, who was sitting not too far away from me, his lips were curling and it didn't impress him at all. I'm not criticising other lodges for what they wish to do, but I think maybe Grand Lodge needs to make a decision on what it should be, and then it should be quite clear. But from my point of view, and I think from the United Forces Lodge, we're still very much you learn your ritual and we do our perambulations somewhat regimentally maybe, but I think when you see it done like that, you appreciate the clarity of the lodge.
We know that there are obviously some men who find it difficult to learn, and so consequently we would never want to impede their enjoyment of it. So there's going to be a bit of to and fro, I'm sure.
I fully agree, and I think that's. I don't think though that we should make that from my point of view. I don't think we should make that a cop out, but we certainly do need to acknowledge that not everyone has the ability. Even we see some people who are great orators, and you and I both know you've seen people within the lodge who has not only learned to charge, but the way they deliver it, you just sit there in awe. And I do. I sit there, and some people, there's a couple within my own lodge, when they do a charge, you think, my gosh, I wish I could do it that well.
We had a case last night, in actual fact, of a first degree candidate, the person who did the charge after initiation, the last one. It was so passionate and so it moved everybody.
Exactly.
It just moved everybody, and even though we've heard the words before, it was just sensationally done. I think our viewers, a lot of them would not know what we're talking about with regards to what a charge is. Certainly not a charge, isn't a physical one. What's the charge? Tell our audience what the charge is.
Well, I think the charge is basically a set of instructions or some information that's conveyed to the person being initiated to explain sometimes it's the history of the lodge, or about the expectations of being a member of that lodge. And it's you could call it a guide, a spoken guide or a spoken piece of information. But that's, to see someone do that and to do it, as you say, with passion and you actually get it. And I think that comes from it coming from the heart, coming from the mind. I'm not sure that you quite get that from reading it.
Tell us the Speak Up campaign that's been running now. It's actually it's sort of taken hold a little bit, hasn't it? There's a lot of people doing things, a lot of people saying, "Hey, it's good to be a Freemason." There's nothing wrong with being a Freemason.
No, and I think it certainly is time that Freemasonry came out of the cupboard. It's all the whispers. What's Freemasonry all about, and all sorts of negative connotations about what it's about. I think the Speak Up campaign is great, and I think Freemasons really need to get out and be proud of what Freemasonry does. Yeah. We don't sell ourselves, and for example, I could go to the RSA. We quite often tell people of the great work our support managers do, providing support to our veterans, etc. But very few people in the country would know the great work Freemasonry does supporting community organisations. Yeah. And when you talk about my own lodge, where we support the cadet units in Christchurch, we support the young people doing surf lifesaving. We go out in the community and we just help the general community people on different projects. And I think people would be quite surprised to know the generosity of Freemasons in providing scholarships, etc., for people at universities. So I think that's actually to our detriment. We don't sell ourselves enough. And the Speak Up campaign is a great opportunity to do that.
Well, it's been great having you on the Speak Up TV show this week, my friend. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Christchurch. Look forward to seeing you. I'll come down your way too.
It's been a great pleasure.
And I look forward to meeting you down there in Christchurch.
Thank you.
Andro Besich, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me tonight.
You're here, of course, because you're a great Freemason, but you're also a great marathon runner. Now, we'll talk about that in a second, because on last Friday, I was fortunate enough to be an MC for a big conference, and the guest speaker on the Friday night had completed 7 marathons in 7 continents in 7 days. Now, I know you've done over 7 marathons, of course, in over 7 continents, but I don't think in 7 days, is that right?
No, 7 days. I am mad enough, but not
that mad, right?
Not that mad, yes.
But you've done marathons in incredible places and extreme climates. I mean, Rio, that's not so much a great climate, but in China, in the Antarctic, in the Polar Circle, in the outback of Australia, South Africa. Amazing places you've been to.
Yes. It is a journey to the self-discovery. The point also is how much you can take it or how much you can go through pain.
Yeah.
Once when I completed 7 continents, when I became member of the 7 Continent Club, I tried to find the marathons which would challenge my physical strength and my mental strength.
Not ever having done a marathon, Andro, myself, but I know that the ones who the elite runners, the ones who actually win these marathon races as a race, you do it as a personal betterment for yourself, I know that. It's usually about 2 hours and 6 minutes, isn't it? Type thing. So not putting you on the spot, but you know, and I know that as time goes on, probably the time of a marathon gets further out because you're not out there to race it. So your best time that you've recorded yourself is what?
My best time was my first marathon in Rotorua, and that's always stay in your mind. 3 hours, 50 minutes and 26 seconds. My second best time is in Philadelphia, 3 hours and 51 minutes. Not the best, but the good times.
Still good.
Good times, yeah.
You see, now I know that your marathon's been over a number of years, I accept that, but are you still training sort of as much, when I say training, you're still out jogging? In the last 3 months, have you done as much training as you did 3 months a year ago?
Well, much more now, because I have 2 big projects. One is the Caribbean Running Festival in Barbados, which Anna and I will fly 27th of November. And this is just as a preparation for probably the biggest challenge of my life, which I'm registered for the Marathon des Sables in Morocco, 250 kilometers
in Morocco.
In Morocco, 250 kilometers through Sahara, on self-sufficient. Which means you have a backpack and you have to carry your food, everything with you, and organizer only providing 12 liters of water a day. That will be the biggest challenge of my life.
That will be immense. And when are you going to do that one? When's that happening?
Between the race between 3rd of the April and 13th of the April next year. So all my running and training now is actually has a focus for that race, and Barbados marathon is actually part of the preparation for the Marathon des Sables race.
So when your shoes run out, as I'm sure they do, right? How do you pick a new one, or do you go back to your old favourites?
I'm running with the same shoes since I started running since 12 years ago, and you actually monitor the strength and of the shoes, and you recording your mileage, and you know when you come about 800 kilometers, it's time to change them.
A new pair?
New pair, yeah.
Okay.
And the 100 kilometers in the peak of my training would take me 2 months.
Okay.
To complete it.
Yeah, great. So the marathons that you've done, is there one that sticks out in your mind that's probably the most favourite? I mean, is it the Mount Blanc one? Yeah, I know you've mentioned that.
My most favourite marathon actually was Marathon of Philadelphia. Philadelphia, that was the 23,000 people, which means not big enough. Temperature of the marathon was starting 2 degrees, and on the marathon was 12 degrees. I like run on the cold, and I really enjoy that marathon very much. Most difficult marathon, obviously, was Tenzing Hillary marathon. That was the most difficult one. Most difficult,
indeed. Because they always talk about the marathon wall, don't they, where people either go out too fast or they burn the glycogen from their muscles and they just can't go any further. So you're pretty good about that, right?
No, I never hit the wall, because I know what I can and what I can't, right. After all these years. So I know exactly when I need to start speed up when I not going to speed up because my body is not feeling right. So I do these. Depends how my body feels, and I always finish in the race comfortably. When I mean comfortable, I don't mean anymore that I have a top time. I mean comfortable feeling with my body.
So you with your wife Anna came from a lovely little seaside village called Trogir, is that
Trogir,
right?
yeah.
Trogir, which is on the Adriatic coast of Croatia, right?
That's correct, yes.
Which, from the photos I've seen, is such a beautiful, beautiful little...
Very nice city.
Absolutely. So you came to New Zealand because of a better life, or...
To make the better life for our children. That was the number one reason to come here.
And so I believe that you sort of fell over Freemasonry, if I can use that term, by sort of walking your dog here in New Zealand.
That is a legend now. I thought about it, but never make a decision.
Right.
And then, yes, we bought a dog. We have a Jack Russell who needs to be exercised, and we bought a new house in Stocks Valley, and we start walking. I start walking the dog, of course. Kids always promise to do something, but I never deliver. So I start walking the dog along the Stocks Valley when I look in the Stocks Valley Lodge. And then going all my desire came back, and
so there would have been some tipping factor for you to either go up and knock on the door or make a step somewhere. Can you remember? Blow it, I'm going to do it. What was that eureka moment, if I can call it that?
I wouldn't say that was any tipping point. I would say that was gradually desire I was building in me, and eventually happened. I don't remember really any tipping point like that.
And the lodge that you remember of, I think it's the Trentham Lodge,
Trentham
right?
Lodge 262, yes.
262. And so I think we'll give a shout out to the brethren. I believe you've got a master?
Our worship master is worship brother Engung. Hello, Eng.
So he's from?
He's from Cambodia.
Cambodia,
yeah.
Great.
We are known in Wellington area as a Lodge of the Accent, as you can see.
The Lodge of the Accents, that's true. Andre, it's been fabulous having you tonight. Thank you very much. Much success in the new, with your marathons. The one you're doing in Morocco sounds unbelievable.
That's a killer.
Maybe when you get it done, perhaps next year, next season,
yes.
We'll get you back and you can tell us how
I can send you all videos. Yes.
Much success, mate.
Thank you very much.
Good on you.
Thank you very much.
And closing out the show, of course, is our regular contributor, Graham Houston. Hello, Graham. Lovely to see you, mate. You know, I think you and I both agree that unfortunately at times we do hear of lodges sort of closing. You know, that's just the way it is, things happen. But, and more than once, in my life anyway, of course, you have new lodges forming. And I think that's what you're going to talk about today, right?
Correct. And you're right. Lodges do close for a variety of reasons. And as we've probably said before, you've got industry, employment opportunities, and populations move away from areas, jobs change, employment opportunities change, and people move out and just leave the little town, which was a thriving town, now is a little town, but it still has a dwindling number of members. So lodges will close. We have, last Saturday, on the 19th of October, a new lodge formed in the county's Hauraki area. Now, it was a lodge that was formed, not because other lodges closed, but it resulted in 4 lodges looking and reviewing their own circumstances, looking at their membership, looking at their futures, and of course, looking at their buildings and the work and the maintenance required, bringing them up to earthquake requirements, and said, if we are to progress and make the progress that we want, what is the way forward? And so their lodges were old, and you're getting on to 100 years of age. They felt that the way forward was new concept, new way of looking at things, and they formed a new lodge, not an amalgamation of lodges, but a new lodge called Lodge Matariki number 476.
And Matariki means what, do you know?
Matariki represents the constellation of the stars in Masonic terms. And look at the first degree tracing board and you'll see it from there.
Quite so.
So the lodge is formed, and it's been formed with 114 new members. That is a very big number. There's very few lodges in New Zealand that will have 114 members. Jeff France is the current master of Matariki, but every other office in that lodge is held by a master mason and will continue to be so. Second objective is to obtain a building which will have a rental income. That'll be a commercial one from either offices or with retail, so that the whole thing becomes self-sufficient, and those plans are well underway. The third one is that today it is important that wives are very involved in what we do. And it's particularly so in the county's Hauraki area. There will be a women's division formed for Lodge Matariki.
Wow.
A lot of the lodge work is underway. The women will have their own functions, will organise their own particular events and merge with the men at the appropriate time, such as at the end of lodge meetings.
Well, that's a good initiative.
It's a very good initiative, and it's one that's quite exciting because today many wives work and they share responsibilities. And so with an organisation like this, we have to recognise that and we have to make those sorts of provisions.
So where is the location of the lodge? Where are they going to meet?
The building that was considered didn't complete, and so they're on the lookout again for the new building. What they call the constitution of the lodge, and the first installation was held at the Jet Park Hotel in Westney Road at the airport, and that was held last Saturday. 180 to 200 people were sitting in that lodge room, a very big meeting for a lodge meeting, and there was the same number for dinner that night. So it was an all-day affair. So it was very much a busy day. The logo or the monogram of the there is the stars and the constellation representing the Matariki logo for that too. So it's a new way of looking at some lodge, and I believe this is what lodges have to do. It's not about merging lodges and trying to retain each other's identity, because that doesn't matter whether it's a tennis club, a bowling club, a Rotary club. You do that.
It's a formula for failure.
It's a formula for failure. Yeah. This is a brand new lodge.
Clean break, start something new.
Absolutely. So that is Lodge Matariki. It's a new way of lodges creating themselves. It's exciting, and so membership is now drawn from all over the Auckland area. It's not just limited to counties Hauraki. We've got members joining from the Auckland as well, because there is an excitement. Lodge Matariki, Lodge of the future, of the new way forward, which the belief that Lodge Matariki is.
Well, I wasn't there, but it did look like a great occasion, and congratulations on the new lodge forming. I know it'll be successful with you behind it. I know that you drive things along, so good on you, mate.
Thank you, Barry.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Before we close tonight, at the time of our talk last week, what Graham Houston didn't know was that he was going to receive a huge promotion by the Grand Master to the position of Right Worshipful Brother Graham Houston, past Grand Warden. Congratulations from the whole Speak Up team, Graham. Well, that's our show for this week. Don't forget, if you'd like to know more about Freemasonry, and you won't find it in the Dan Brown's book, but you will by going to the Grand Lodge website, which is freemasonsnz.org. In the meantime, if you've been thinking, planning, or asking questions about joining Freemasonry, we have a website for this very purpose. It's simply welcometofreemasonry.co.nz. We hold a regular dinner experience where you can meet other Freemasons before making a decision to join. So once again, thanks for joining us. See you next week.